Okay, so welcome back to the tutorial, everybody. And in this lesson, we're going to go ahead and get an introduction to our modeling tool set. Now, whenever we look at our, let's say, Polygon shelf, you can see that there are a lot of tools that are actually on our shelf here. But these tools are also not only contained within inside our mesh layout here of our Polygon module, but they're also under our edit mesh tool set. And now, as you can see, there are a lot of tools here, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what do all these tools actually go ahead and do? I'm going to show you individually exactly what each one of these do, as well as a good portion of these. Some I won't actually go ahead and define simply because there isn't necessarily enough time to go ahead and do that, and I don't think I actually have an example to go ahead and do all of these. But okay, let's go ahead and let's first take a look here at our mesh menu. As you can see, we have probably about 24 here. Okay, so let's just go ahead and just work through, and we'll just go ahead and see what each one of these do. So let's go ahead and we'll start off with a polygon sphere here. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and change our subdivision axes down to something like 12. Which you can see is over here on the right hand side, simply in our inputs information tab. But you can also just simply go ahead and change the radius if you want to by just clicking on the letter or on the name of what that item is, and then just middle mouse button drag, and it'll either increase or decrease as you want. The subdivision axis and height will actually do the same. As you can see, the geometry there sort of changing. Okay, so let's just go back to 12 here. The create UVs is basically working in conjunction with your UV editor, and I'll go ahead and explain that in a little bit here. Okay, so let's just hit 5 on our keyboard to bring back our shaded model, and we're going to turn our wireframes on here. Okay, so we have one of these in our scene, and we're not obviously going to be able to go ahead and combine this. So you have to think of it as combining it with something else. Okay, so let's just go ahead and let's duplicate this just by hitting Control D. Okay, and now you can see that we have two individual ones here. Okay, so let's go ahead and select these, hit combine, and let's see what this does. And as you can see, it simply combines them. Okay, so instead of having two meshes, we simply have one mesh now. Okay, and separate is basically going to do the opposite here, where instead of combining them, it's going to separate them back. So instead of now having one, we have two individual meshes again. Okay, let's take a look at extract here. Let's go ahead and delete this one, and we'll go ahead and move this back here. And you should also understand that, and should also know that you should always delete the type by history here. Okay, should always modify and center your pivot here so that your pivot is basically in the center of your model, and you want to freeze your transformations. And if you take a look, whenever I run this over here in the channel box, it's gonna basically set everything back to 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and extract here, and we'll need to go ahead and not necessarily open the channel box here, but it's going to extract faces here, as you can see is what it says. So let's just go ahead and select a couple faces here. Okay, hit extract, and now if we go back into object mode here, you can see that it has simply extracted those faces from the model. Okay, so let's go back and jump a few steps here. Your booleans are these are a little bit complex. I'll give you an understanding of what they do here too. So let's just go ahead and just duplicate this one here. Okay, and we'll just move this down at least in a place where it's going to work. And I'm just going to run a script from my shelf there. Okay, so let's just select one, select the bottom one, and we'll take a look and see what this union does. And it basically works the same way that the combine function inside of Maya works. Okay, select the top one again, select the bottom one. Your difference is basically going to be the difference of the model. So you can see where we have one that's actually inserted inside of the other one, and it's basically giving you the difference of what's sort of being subtracted from the model. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the intersection one, where it's just going to give you the intersecting faces, or where the model's actually intersecting with each other. Whenever I'm modeling, I tend not to use the actual Boolean functions, because a lot of the times it's going to give you geometry that's sort of malformed. If you can use these properly, yes, it is powerful, but I tend to actually not use these a lot. I tend to do a lot of things by hand simply because it's easier. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring those back here. Let's delete this bottom one. Take this other one and bring it down here. Okay, the smooth function here is basically just going to smooth your model, as you can see there. That's pretty self-explanatory. Your average vertices really works in conjunction sort of the same way as the smooth tool, so there's really no need to actually go ahead and run this. Your transfer attributes is more for things like transferring UV maps from one to another. Same with the paint transfer attributes weights tool. Your clipboard actions, I really don't tend to use these a lot either. Reduce is basically going to reduce the geometry that's on your model here. Okay, so if you want to, let's say, reduce it by 50%, you can see where it's going to sort of take at least 50% of that geometry out of the model. Okay. Clean up. This is more for things like telling you if you have 5-sided faces or malformed geometry that's actually in your model. And let's go ahead and take a look at this one. As you can see here, fixed by, and this is going to be important, say, whenever it comes to game models, and if you need to actually go ahead and fix your model to make sure it's all quads before it gets triangulated, this is going to help you do that. Triangulate is basically going to work similar to what a game engine would work. It's basically going to triangulate your model. Quadrangulate, so if you have a triangulated mesh here, it's going to do its best to go ahead and make your model completely quads. As you can see there, it will just take and remove all the triangulation to it. Okay, fill hole is basically going to fill a hole here. So let's go ahead and select a few faces, and I'll show you what this is going to do here. And we need to go ahead and basically just select the border edge of what is going to be the hole. Go ahead and fill the hole, and you can see where it basically fills the hole, but it doesn't necessarily fill the hole in a way that it's going to give you back all that geometry. You would actually have to go ahead and make all of these geometric cuts. Okay, create polygon tool is basically going to allow you to create a polygon. Sculpt geometry tool. Now, this isn't going to work like ZBrush. This is going to give you more of a general type sculpt, okay? And you can see where the geometry is sort of going to change here. This doesn't necessarily have a lot of resolution, but yeah, you can see where it's going to be powerful for things like creating terrain and stuff. Okay. And I just simply made the brush larger by grabbing B and just dragging it, or pressing down B and just left mouse and drag. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at our mirror cut geometry, or our mirror. So let's go ahead and try to delete 1/2 of this. Well, let's just go ahead and create a new one. It'll make it easier. Take this down to 12 again. Okay, so let's go ahead and just delete 1/2 of this. Okay, so let's select it. Take a look at our mirror geometry. Okay. And it's basically just going to mirror the geometry and the axis that we have selected. Now you can either merge with the original or choose not to merge the vertices. You sort of want to keep this on. In some cases you may have to turn it off whenever you're using it. And you can see where it's going to basically mirror our geometry here, as you can see. And it'll also do it in the Y direction. Um, Positive and negative in both directions is basically what it does there. Okay, so let's go ahead and just remirror this. Oops. And it works in conjunction with your access tool here, or your access icon. So knowing which directions you're actually mirroring in is going to be helpful. Okay, so let's take a look at our edit mesh menu here. And I'll walk you through a portion of these except for the bottom. Okay, because these really aren't necessarily modeling tools that I tend to use a lot. So you mainly want to understand what the big ones do here. So your keep faces together here works in conjunction with your extrude tool. Okay, so let's just go ahead and select a few faces here. And let's go ahead and hit extrude here. And I'm just going to simply scale in uniformly. And you can see where it's keeping these faces together whenever it extrudes. So let's go ahead and turn this off. We'll go ahead and hit G to repeat the last command that we used, which is our extrude. Okay. And now you can see where it's not going to keep those faces together whenever we extrude in. As you can see there. Let's go ahead and let's turn this back on. Okay, so that's the keep faces together and our extrude. Let's go ahead and we're going to need to duplicate this again. Okay. And let's just go ahead and delete some faces off of both of these here. Okay. And we'll need to go ahead and combine these. Okay, we'll just double click so we can select the entire border edge of that hole. And let's take a look at our bridge. As you can see, it basically bridges the gap between those two. And you can always adjust the resolution and whatnot as you see fit. The taper is basically going to make one end smaller. Okay, so it's tapering from large to small. And you can see where it'll also basically twist here, which we don't necessarily have enough geometry to go ahead and do that. Okay, let's go ahead and basically fill that hole, and let's go ahead and delete this side again here. Okay, your cut faces tool is sort of going to be cutting faces on your model here. Okay, so let's go ahead and select it and just click an edge, and you can see where it drags out like a large edge. Now whenever I release the left mouse button, you're going to see where it's going to sort of cut faces on your model, but it's not going to just cut it on one side. It's going to cut it completely through the geometry of the model, as you can see here. Let's go ahead and go back there. Let's grab our split polygon tool, and this is basically going to allow you to split polygons at any sort of universal point that's on your model here. As you can see, you can simply draw it out from any point. It doesn't have to necessarily start at two vertices or at a collection of vertices. You can simply start right in the middle of an edge, and then you just hit enter to go ahead and actually stop the tool there. Let's go ahead and draw it back there. Our insert edge loop tool is, pretty self-explanatory. It just basically allows you to insert an edge loop. Okay. Our offset edge loop is going to allow us to draw an edge on each side of an edge that's actually on the model. As you can see here, instead of drawing one, it draws two, as you can see there. Add divisions is basically going to allow us to add divisions to our model. You can see here. Now you can either do that uniformly or exponentially, which is just uniformly. The exponentially is just going to be in one direction, whether it's in your U direction or your V direction, as you can see there. And you'll also see that almost every single tool inside of Maya has these little option boxes to allow you to adjust your settings before you use them. but I tend to use them, and then I'll just adjust them over here on the side. So let's go ahead and take a look at the slide edge tool. This is basically going to allow you to grab an edge. Just grab an edge and we'll hit the slide tool, edge tool, and it sort of just slides an edge. Somewhat useful, but you know what I mean, if you need to go ahead and actually move an edge, it's just easier to move that edge yourself. But you can see where it's going to allow you to go ahead and slide the edge. Transform component we aren't going to take a look at. Flip triangle edge we aren't really going to take a look at. Spin the edge here is just simply this, and you can see where it, you know, is somewhat useful there. Poke face here is I would say you have to think of it as sort of like taking a pin and poking a hole in your face. Okay, so let's just with a face selected here, you can see if we use that poke face, it basically just sort of like takes a pin and pokes your face, but it also will take and give you a little bit of extra geometry there. Duplicate face here, so if we just select another face, hit duplicate face, instead of having one face we're going to have two of those faces. You can see where if you use your imagination here, this is going to be useful in terms of, say, like maybe parenting something to the mesh in terms of rigging or something. Okay. Detached component. This is where it's probably a little bit more complex here, but before I go ahead and delete these edges, let's go ahead and just delete the edge and vertex here, and you can see where it's going to delete all that geometry, all that extra geometry. Okay, your detach and connect components. Every point that's on your mesh has 4 different vertices into it. Okay, so let's go ahead and detach our component on our vertex there. So now if we go ahead and select the vertex, you can see that we're going to have 4 different components here that make up that single vertex. Okay. And connect components is basically going to work the opposite way, where it's sort of going to allow you to merge those. Okay. The merge tool here is basically allowing you to merge 2 vertices together, as you can see there. Now let's just go ahead and move these vertices up and down here. The merge to center here, okay, is basically going to merge to the center of this gap. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that, and you can see where it comes right back to the center. The collapse here is going to work on your faces here, so let's just select a bunch of different faces. Okay, and it's basically going to take out a lot of this geometry, and as you can see there. Okay, the merge vertex tool and the merge edge tool are basically the same thing. So let's go ahead and take a look at our delete edge and vertex here. So you can simply just select an edge, delete that edge and the vertices. So it's going to take out the edge and the vertices, and if we just went ahead and selected that edge and hit delete on our keyboard, you can see where the geometry doesn't change, and that's because the vertices are actually still in here, as you can see. Okay. Chamfer vertex is basically just going to chamfer that edge. Bevel will give you a bevel to that edge. Okay, and you can always, you know, adjust the attributes in the side there, as you can see, and you can also add segments to it. Now you can see where the segments are only going to go up to 12, but if you just click in there and add a higher number, you can also see where you can add a larger number to that, and it works the same way with the bridge tool as well. Okay, and so now that we have all of our pretty much modeling tools down, you can see where this is, you know, fairly powerful in terms of being able to create geometry and modify that geometry in sort of any way that you want. Maya is great for that. If we take a look at our normals here, the main things that you really have to understand here are basically your reverse and set the face. The rest of these are sort of, I don't really want to say useless, but they're overdrawn. You really don't have to understand them. The main ones here that you really have to understand are your reverse and set the face. So let's go ahead and turn on our lighting here, and you can see where this is completely gray. Okay, so let's go ahead and come up here to the normals, reverse, and you can see where this is now going to turn black. This is geometry that you wouldn't want in terms of rendering, because a lot of the times, whether you're rendering with Mental-Ray or whether you're rendering with V-Ray, it's not necessarily going to be able to see these black faces simply because they're reversed. So you want to be able to have clean geometry and faces that are actually set to render. So you, whenever you render your model, you definitely want to make sure that your geometry is actually gray here instead of being black. Okay. Your soften your edges is basically going to soften the edges on your model. It's not necessarily going to make that model smooth. It's just basically going to soften the edges here. Okay. And it only goes up to 180. You can't necessarily change that. Okay. Harden the edge is basically going to harden the edges of your model, and it just works backwards to the soften the edges on your model. Okay. So now that we have a good understanding of our modeling tools, in the next lesson we will go ahead and come back and continue to learn. So come on back.